This episode of the Oh No 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 podcast is sponsored by Dynamic Industrial Services, the rope access specialists. Every week we talk about the Rovers' latest attempts to climb the SPFL ladder, but sometimes even a ladder won't reach. DIS are specialists in working at height, offering maintenance, inspection, repair and more, right across Scotland. So if you need a rope access specialist and you want a premiership service, visit dynamicindustrialservices.co.uk to find out more.
In 1982, Hollywood director Taylor Hackford had a problem. Despite powerhouse performances from Richard Gere and Deborah Winger, there was something missing from his latest project. With the release date only a month away, Hackford felt the soundtrack needed a lead theme, and he turned to songwriter Will Jennings. Just 30 days later, An Officer and a Gentleman was released to critical and popular acclaim, with its success built upon an iconic final scene, which plays out to Joe Cocker and Jennifer Warnes performing Jennings' new song, which would soon hit the top of the Billboard charts. And in Kirkcaldy this week, we saw the completion of a very different 30-day process, but one which begs a related question. Can Neill Collins take the Rovers up where we belong? Thank you for indulging me in that, and thank you for joining us here for the Oh No 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 podcast, as we finally get to react to the appointment of a new manager. I am Duncan Cameron, and tonight I'm delighted to be joined by four gentlemen. I don't think any of you are officers, but to be fair, you can correct me on that if you wish. First of all, I've got Blair Hopcroft. How are you, Blair?
Oh, mate, I'm delighted it wasn't 29 or 31 days, because that would have been heartbreaking to lose that intro. That was beautiful.
Thank you, mate. Graeme, I think we had a backup for 32 days that was pothole related. How are you? It's, of course, Graeme Meldrum. How are you?
I'm very well. It's been a while since I was on. Obviously been in the board of directors brainwashing therapy longer than the rest of you. So for the 30 days, I think I've been off as well. Anything happened?
Yeah, we had to go back to Ayrshire to find someone else. A troon boy to fill the managerial slot. We've also got Scott Fleming. How are you, Scott?
Yeah, delighted that we've actually got a new gaffer. It's been a long time coming, and I mean, I think the last sort of week especially has been kind of all over the place when it comes to social media, Pine Bovril, all that sort of stuff. So I'm actually just happy that it's over now, so that we can just get knuckled down and get on with it, sort of.
Some anonymous character has been seeding Barry Robson rumours to you and Cameron, so just keep everybody else off the trail. And we've also got Leslie Maybon as well. How are you, Les?
Great. So the day after Ian Murray got binned, I put some homebrew on, and we've been without a manager so long that I've been able to make beer in the time it's taken us to appoint a new manager. And enjoy that what we're discussing tonight.
Fair play. Right, I tell you what, let's just dive straight in. Then there's not an awful lot of structure to this episode. We've just got one big piece of news to talk about, and then the small matter of a game on Sunday that we'll kind of peg on to the end. So, kind of out of nowhere yesterday, we got the teaser tweet that suggested that after 30 days, something was coming anyway. And then we had to wait quite a while. I had to wait a good few hours more for confirmation. But it is indeed former Tampa Bay Rowdies and Barnsley, boring Barnsley, manager Neill Collins, who's the new Raith Rovers manager. Blair, why don't you kick us off? Give us your immediate and overriding reaction to that news, please.
Well, I'm delighted it's over, would be my initial thing. I really felt for the social media guys yesterday because they clearly got it's happening and it's happening in an hour, and then they sent the teaser tweet out, and somebody went, "Paperwork is going to slow this down," and then you're just left waiting. And the thing is, in that position, the Rovers can't do it. Do you know what I mean? They can't announce something until it's officially over the line. So, yeah, I felt for them last night because they'll have been hating how that looked. But no, I'm delighted to have him in. I'm really intrigued. I've used that word quite a lot through this process, but I've been really impressed with the lack of desire to just go down the same managerial merry-go-round, that we kind of get the same names trotted around and they go round in circles. So, I mean, I'll mention this a few times on the show. I know very little about him. I know very, very little about him. I kind of vaguely remember him as a player. It's a name that I recognised. I think it was at Sunderland was the place where I remember him playing, or maybe Wolves. But I know very little about him. Know very little about his managerial career, other than what I've read in the last 24 hours or so. So yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm excited, and I hope that he comes with a plethora of signing options that we've never heard of as well. That would be lovely.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, we still need to find out if he brings everyone back for corners as well, which is the true.
Well, that's. I mean, to be fair, yeah, that's a deal breaker right there.
Graeme, how about you? How do you feel about Neill Collins?
I'm actually quite impressed. I think his name circulated round the start of the whole manager thing. And I think for all the names that came out, he ticks a few boxes for me. He's actually managed a team. He's probably managed a team at a higher level than anybody else as well, that's been mentioned. So these are all great things. Third most important point for me is his first game for Barnsley won 7-0. So, yeah, replicate that, Neil. Happy days. I'm sure he'll be eager to do it, being a Kelly boy. He'll be eager to do this on Sunday as well. And
can we save that for the first league game, please?
How? We'll be on a high. First league game. Come on.
Are we tripped to East End? That'll be fine.
Yeah, as if that's going to go wrong. I'm like Blair. I can remember him as a player. I was also there the day he invaded our pitch. For no apparent reason, a 1-1 draw at the end of the season. What's that all about? Yeah, if he gets us excited about a 1-1 draw, what's he going to be like when we stuff the pars? He's going to be in about us, I think, probably. So yeah, I'm delighted. Delighted.
I really liked that aspect of his interview when he was just talking about kind of being a supporter as much as anything. I actually spent a lot of time just talking about being a Kilmarnock supporter, and he'd been to, I can't remember if David just asked him about something about being to Starks Park previously, and I think he mentioned playing for Dumbarton and was it Sheffield United after he mentioned coming as a supporter, which as a supporter I like that. I like that kind of aspect of it. Leslie, give me your thoughts next, please, just on an overriding level.
Like everybody else, I'm impressed that we've taken our time and we've not gone down the sort of tried and tested Scottish Championship managerial jobber route, and we've actually kind of gone out and done something a bit different. So, like many other people, I'm going to lay the cards on the table and say I didn't know a great deal about Neill Collins' managerial career, but I've gone and had a look, and so he had Barnsley in the top 6 for all of the season in League One in England last year. And League One in England, you've got teams that are spending 10 million plus in players, and Derek Adams has told us that the standard's 1 million times higher than the Scottish Premier down there. So he must be really, really, really good. But I mean, joking aside, I mean, he's done well. And just for a bit of context, Scott Brown was in League One as well and did a decent job. Neill Collins was then, much like Ian Murray, fired under quite bizarre circumstances when he was emptied one game before the playoffs. So he'll be there's that as well. But no, I think, as I say, it's taken a bit of a while, but we've got somebody in who I think is quite exciting and a bit different, and who's hopefully going to kick on with a good group of players that we have.
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of piggyback on that point, Scott, do you think it is at this stage, bearing in mind obviously it could go on to be a disaster, could go on to be a great success. But do you think the appointment of Neill Collins, as opposed to it being someone from the sort of managerial merry-go-round, goes some way to justifying the 30 days that it took to get there?
Yeah, it probably does, to be honest. I mean, I was definitely getting to... I mean, obviously, at first I just found it bizarre that it was going on so long when we were told, oh, we've got such a short list that we're so keen on certain guys. So it sounded like all of us had admitted pretty early on, this will be done within 2 weeks. Like, everybody was saying it because they were just so sure that the board had came out with a plan that they knew who they wanted. And that just, obviously, as we heard in his interview, he was actually approached early on to come round. So he was apparently on that short list. So obviously a lot's clearly went on in the last sort of 3 weeks that's changed. But no, I mean, I just echo what the guys are saying. I am extremely intrigued at how this is going to unfold because other than being a player at times in Scotland, he's not really spent that much time in recent seasons in Scotland. He's been here as a younger player and sort of in his younger days. So I don't know. The good thing is he says that he's always kept tabs, obviously, because he's from Scotland and he's always looked at like the Friday night games and stuff like that and keeping up with the SPL and stuff. So he clearly... I don't have a worry that he doesn't know about the league. Like, I think he's pretty certain he knows what he's coming into. He knows the sort of squad that we've got. He said that he'd been watching the Livingston game at the weekend, and I'm sure he's probably even done even more homework when he was pretty certain he was going to actually become the manager. So, no, I just, as I say, I echo what everyone says. I'm glad that we've actually went for this because, to be honest, that if it had ended up being like one of these names that we were saying that we didn't want, like I would have been one of the first to go, I'm just not having this at all. Like, it was mainly because I wasn't having the sack in it in the first place. But I must say that this appointment is taking, I think, a little bit of pressure off because I think that this is one that I can kind of get on board with straight away, basically.
Yeah, it was a feeling that I had when sort of the David Healy aspect of it kind of went public and then collapsed publicly. That was when I was worried because I thought, like, has that been the thought process of like, oh, he's worth waiting for? Like, we could get David Healy and so we've been hanging on and trying and all this kind of stuff. And then when that collapsed, my sort of worry was, are we just then going to have to go back to the merry-go-round? Are you going to have to go back to the usual suspects? And then you end up with someone you could have had in a couple of days, but it took you 3 weeks to get there. Whereas it does seem like it wasn't all the irons in one fire. That's not a saying. All the eggs in one basket is what I was looking for there. With respect to managers outside just the usual, just the names that mug punters like us could come up with on the fly. I'm going to join the ranks to quite openly say I did not know anything about Neill Collins before, his name first came up, Graeme, as you said, a couple of weeks ago. Even at that point, didn't do much Googling. But it's very clear that people at the football club have had a very deliberate strategy of, we want to go and get specific people. And if it will take time and it will take effort. So, if your only concern was getting it done quickly, you could have given the job to Nacho Novo and you could have had him announced 40 minutes after you'd sacked Ian Murray. Because there wouldn't have been any negotiation, any worries. He'd have been like, yeah, cool, whatever, I'll do it. So they've had to go and push the boat out to actually convince someone of a higher standard that it's worthwhile, and it seems like they've done that. And I say that's not to say that Neill Collins will go on to be an outright success. There's too many variables to say that. But at this point, having not seen a game under him yet, I'm quite. It's a more impressive appointment than I thought we were going to get. Put it that way. Yeah, and Blair, in terms of the kind of process that we've been on to get to this point, I mean, it does seem like the board are pretty, or Andrew Bannerman, I think, was directly quoted as saying that Neill Collins was the first choice. But he did also say they'd offered it to 2 other people, and we know David Healy was one of them. So are you prepared to take that at face value?
I would say ordinarily no, because I think that's just, do you know what it's like? So in my job, I sometimes have to interview people for jobs, and when you phone somebody to tell them they're not getting the job, you always say they were really close to getting the job, right? Because that's just polite. Like, that's just what you say. So ordinarily, I would say no. But the thing is, there has to be a case for it being true. And the one thing I'll say is that I did hear his name genuinely 3 weeks ago. Like, somebody mentioned his name to the point where I went, Neill Collins, that's like vaguely familiar in my head, but I can't place him. Did the Googling and then was like, oh yeah, I remember him playing and that kind of thing. And then forgot all about it. So I think it's quite plausible that he was on the original shortlist. But there's a big difference between being on a shortlist and being offered a job. So my thinking, and it's just me, I've no idea, not to verify this at all, but my thinking is that they spoke to him 3-4 weeks ago, along with 2 or 3 other people, and he very quickly either was more expensive than they were planning to spend, is one option, or, as he said in his own interview, he's got 4 kids and lives down south, and is maybe when, I'm no sure the timing's right, it's maybe no for me. And then the process moves on, and when it comes back to it, it's quite plausible he's seen the whole David Healy thing and went, oh man, that could have been mine, and then it's fallen apart and went, oh, like there's a wee opportunity there, or the Rovers have gone back to him and went, right, okay, fair enough, we'll meet the money that you were wanting, because actually we've realised that although, and again it's that thing, say he's first choice and he wants X amount of money, and your second choice wants a lot less than X amount of money, and there's not a lot in it for you between your first choice and your second choice, you're probably not going to break the bank to get the first choice if your second choice is still, like a really good option and is a good bit cheaper. But the truth is, we'll never know. Like, we absolutely won't. But he said himself in his interview that they spoke to him a while ago, and I love the fact that he said John Potter gave him the hard sell, because it's what every player says when he signs as well. I love the fact that it's managers as well. I can't wait for them to come out with like a new head of catering, and he'd be like, "Oh, John Potter just sold the job to me. It was incredible. He told me everything I could do."
He's wasted in football, John Potter. Anytime anyone speaks to him, he sounds like Don Draper in Mad Men. He's just like an advertising savant, except
he can sell anything to anyone.
He's cursed to only being able to sell Raith Rovers to people. He should really be working for, I don't know, a high-end sort of technology firm or something. But
Totally.
Listen, happy to have him for while we've got him, because it certainly seems to be working. That, yeah, I mean, they were both sort of present for a B licence course, and John Potter managed to convince him to come for a stadium tour, which, for a football manager, it must be a little bit like, I have been to stadiums before. Like, this is the big green bit in the middle. You've got one of those, cool. Like, but for whatever reason, he came along and apparently that worked. So,
but that's the thing. I love the fact that he mentioned that, and it was almost like, I was on the fence, and then I saw the dressing room, and I was like, "Yep, sign me up." Like, they've done a really good job with that dressing room.
The USB chargers and everything, and But that, I mean, to be fair, that's a serious point. That must make a big, big, big difference. If you're, like, again, I know Neill Collins was talking, he played at Starks Park previously and stuff. He's not a complete stranger to the environment, and he knows the league and all that kind of stuff. But if you were bringing a manager from down south who hadn't been previously, bringing them to the Starks Park of today versus the Starks Park of 2 years ago, that's a very different... You'd almost be like, come for an interview, but somewhere else. Like, we'll show you the ground once you've signed the contract. Like,
Come to the Dean Park, it's lovely.
Yeah, the changing room. No, it's huge. Don't worry about it. Like, it's fine.
Well, I remember playing one of those fans games, and it must have been 4 years ago, and we were in the away dressing room, and it was as basic could be. It was terrible. Yeah, so you could probably see why there may be a conversation between the two of them and going, aye, but your ground's a shithole. No, wait a minute, and you come. Yeah, because it was awful. Absolutely awful.
I mean, they talk a lot about like providing an elite environment, and obviously that's huge for the people who already are there, the players and the staff. But that's again, that's a selling point in and of itself. Probably paying dividends really. So, Graeme, in terms of Neill Collins, and I think we've all been doing bits of kind of research and bits of scrambling, and I'm going to come on and talk about his kind of his style of football and what we can glean from that in a minute or two. But just give me your impression of Neill Collins, kind of as a person. Presumably you watched that interview that he did as well. What was your take on kind of Neill Collins and how he maybe compares to the average football manager or the stereotype of a football manager?
I actually loved. I didn't love the brown jumper, but I actually loved the comment where he said, it's all about styles, but most importantly it's about winning games. Yeah, because we all hear this. Liverpool play a certain way, Celtic play a certain way, everybody plays a certain way. End of the day, it's good to play attractive football. If you play attractive football and get beat, are we really excited about that? No. Play win games. That's what he's in to do. That's what he'll be judged on, winning games. So it was good to hear that kind of honesty as well. Hopefully it's no turgid stuff to win games, but that's what it's all about. And there was a lot of honesty in his interview that I felt, and I'm going to coin the phrase, he didn't seem up his own arse. There wasn't a lot of arrogance about him. He just seemed quite humble. Now, if you look at his playing career, he started off, I think he played boys club football with Kilmarnock, went to the juniors and come up Queen's Park, Dumbarton. He's come up the hard way into football to play championship level down south. So I did feel he was humble, and I did feel, as you said earlier, the bit about being a football supporter, he maybe just gets it, and I think that's what came across, certainly to me anyway. I was pure lapping it up. It was great.
There's a couple of articles that I'll retweet when I put this episode up, and I'll link them into the YouTube show notes bit as well, because I thought they were very, very different articles, but both kind of enlightening in their own way. So one is a sort of tactical analysis of his time at Barnsley. It's written while he's still in the job. It's very kind of football nerd stuff, because there's a lot about XG and deep completions and all that kind of stuff. But if you can kind of read through that, it's quite interesting, and it basically goes through the systems that he uses and all this kind of stuff. But I actually thought the sort of overriding feeling I got from that it was kind of couched in pragmatism, because a lot of it. So that, I mean, basically the kind of purpose of the article, or the central point of the article, was comparing Neill Collins to his immediate predecessor, who'd done sort of relatively well the season before, but had never quite managed to put it all together. And a lot of it it seemed like it was more pragmatic than anything else. So it wasn't that he came in and went, right, I'm really wedded to a 3-5-2, and I want to do this really high press, I want to do this kind of stuff. It seemed more like he kind of came in, saw that the team could play a 3-5-2, and that's what they were used to doing, and then he just made these kind of slight changes to it. And Liz, I want to ask you about some of that type of stuff just in a second or two, but just because I mentioned the two articles, the other one I think is more interesting and more readable, certainly. It's for a website called Coach's Voice, which is basically they'll interview a manager, but then they kind of turn it into sort of a long form article. And it's really interesting because it's much more about Neill Collins kind of as a person and his view on kind of the game and all that kind of stuff. And the one bit in particular that I wanted to pull out of that is he's talking about sort of his mentor when he got the job at the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And he says, this guy he's once said, most coaches are players who then coached after retirement. Neill was a coach who played. It's true, I thought a lot about what I would do as a manager when I was a player. I think at times it came to the detriment of my playing career. A lot of players are better when they focus on themselves and what they need to do. I learned that as I got older. I probably did spend too much time thinking about how the team could be better. That's why I'd like to think I can go on and have a better career coaching than I did playing. And I think that says a lot about him. I think from that little bit, I think you get a real feel for the kind of guy that he is. It seems like he's quite analytical, quite, sort of interested in the game as a whole. And that's the kind of thing I think you want to hear from a guy who's just been appointed your manager, is that actually he's been thinking about managing kind of the whole time along. So as I say, those two articles that I'll put in, I really recommend the Coach's Voice one. The Barnsley one's interesting if you can get through some of the more kind of opaque tactical stuff. But Leslie, to stick to the the kind of opaque tactical stuff just for a moment. Yeah, so you were kind of nodding your head there as I was saying about the kind of the 3-5-2 and all that side of things. Do you anticipate much in the way of a kind of tactical shift? Can you see this Rovers squad that obviously we know really well really being kind of transformed? Or do you think it's not going to take that? Will it take just kind of some kind of tweaks that Neill Collins can identify to kind of get things firing again?
So I was thinking about this, and something that has struck me over the last few years, if you look at the managers that have won this league, so you've got Jim Goodwin, Gary Bowyer, and then you go back to guys like Derek McInnes, Robbie Nielsen. Apart from the fact that many of them have been in charge of teams that have just come down, a common factor that their fans are always saying is, oh, they're really boring. We need to do something really different when we go up or we're going to come straight back down. And you kind of think, aye, but you won the league and got promoted. So I think that pragmatism is actually exactly what we need. I mean, playing with Scott McGill at centre-back and Aidan Connolly as a centre-forward from the 67th minute onwards is great fun, but it's not a wise or sustainable way to win a league. So it's quite nice, I think, just to hear that kind of pragmatism. I think the bit that struck me from Neill Collins' interview yesterday was when he was saying, he says, I'm not going to say that I play a particular style because it's so open to interpretation. I'm not going to say this is what we do. But I was like you. I was kind of struck by the how pragmatic he seemed in kind of looking at who we have. And maybe that's what we need, is to an extent somebody who's going to come in and maybe just spot things that we could just be doing subtly differently that we're not doing. And we're not going to do anything daft like try to convert Josh Mullen to the right back of a back three or anything bonkers like that. But maybe just somebody thinking a little bit differently. And again, this is maybe pure speculation. There's nothing to back this up. So I was listening to that interview as well, and I was thinking about all the timings that Neill Collins was talking about and having a stadium tour and goodness knows what else. I could be totally wrong here, and I've got nothing to base this on. I just wonder if the change in formation on Saturday, now we see it in hindsight, was maybe something he'd said at the end of last week. Maybe we could try this. And we've gone and we've tried it, and it's actually come out quite well. Who knows? But no, I think that pragmatism, somebody who's just going to look at what we're doing with fresh eyes and with a bit of experience, I think is exactly what we need. I hope anyway.
And Scott, is there anything in particular that you're sort of hoping to see or hoping not to see from Neill Collins when he kind of presumably will be taking charge from Sunday onwards?
I'm hoping to see goals. We've been severely lacking in August, considering our goal of the month is a penalty. It is genuinely just I would like us to just start creating chances again. I mean, when you go back to last season, yeah, we overachieved in that first half of the season especially, but we were obviously we weren't battering teams because we were winning games 3-2 or 4-3 or 2-1, but it was 2-1 going on. It could have been 5 because of the amount of chances we just missed. Like Jack Hamilton could have had about 5 hat-tricks last season, the chances he missed. But the good thing of that is, well, we got into the positions to get these chances. We're not even, until Saturday there, we weren't even getting into the position to try and get a chance. So if he can somehow just instill a little bit of confidence into the players again, give them that little maybe idea or whatever that they've maybe not heard, and it's a new voice to them as well, so they'll probably go, well, he's a new gaffer, I want to impress him, so I'll go and do what he wants me to do, and hopefully it works. But yeah, in terms of what I don't want him to do, I mean, the thing is, we've not really seen him. Well, I think we've admitted none of us have watched Barnsley in League One for last season. So not one of us can go, well, I hope he doesn't do what he did last year with Barnsley. At the end of the day, he actually was in a similar position with Ian Murray. He got sacked in a position that he probably shouldn't have been sacked for. Again, it sounded actually like the fans weren't that bothered that he got sacked, considering they even made the playoffs. But yeah, it's I don't really have anything that I'm thinking of that I don't want him to do, really. It's just a case of let's just try and start creating chances again, because it kind of, for the last couple of weeks especially, it did get a little bit frustrating and boring at times, the fact that we were not doing anything with the ball.
I mean, it sounds like, as you say, from very much from the outside, because I have no knowledge of Barnsley whatsoever, but it from the bit of reading that I've done, it sounds like his problem at Barnsley was sort of not really, and I mean, it sounds very reminiscent of Ian Murray, actually. It was kind of, it wasn't so much the results, it was the manner of the results. He wasn't quite sort of doing it with enough panache or pizzazz or whatever that whatever word it was where you kept using previously. It was pizzazz. But I think that was a slightly different situation. I think Barnsley as a football club see themselves as a championship club, and they'd been relegated into League One, and then they were 5th, and that was a very different situation for them. Actually, I don't think it's equivalent. I think the equivalent would be if we get relegated to League One here, and then the manager was 2nd or 3rd and wasn't quite doing it. I think that would be the sort of equivalent dynamic. A little bit like Jim Goodwin last season in kind of Dundee United's poorer sort of spells. And I don't quite know how much you can read into that. I mean, sorry, I forget who it was. Someone mentioned Scott Brown already, who was down in League One with Fleetwood last season, or the season before. It's very difficult to kind of move that across and try and get a 1-for-1 to really kind of predict it. I think it's actually really nice to have a new manager and not know a single thing about him. It doesn't come around very often. You know, typically you get a new manager and you're like, "Yep, it's John McGlynn again." Yeah, yep, know this one. Or like, "Yep, that's the Airdrie manager. We played them 4 times, so we know what he's all about." So it definitely
just Les's point about winning the league, and the last few teams that have won the league have been accused by their own fans of being a bit boring. But it's like Les says that the teams that have come down. But it got me thinking, because I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody of going, they're mints, they're going up, but they'll come straight back down. Do you know, in the last 10 years, the winner of the championship has only been relegated twice? So Dundee United have won the championship twice, and Hearts have won the championship twice in the last 10 years. But in that 10 years, every other team that's gone up is still currently in the Premier League. Like, maybe this is actually a bit like. I wonder if it's a. No, because I mean, you go back. I'm just basing it on the teams that have won the championship.
Oh, right, they went up through the playoffs, sorry.
They went up through the playoffs, yeah, but the teams that have actually won the championship. Like, if you've got to be boring to get up, maybe that's what you've got to do. But I think the other thing they all have in common is they were all capable of blowing teams away, which is the one thing last season that Dundee United could do that we just never could. We could never get that 3-4 goal win. But I just kind of wonder if there's like it's kind of interesting because you were talking about the idea that, Barnsley are a championship side relegated to League One, so they viewed it through a different perspective. So like Dundee United are a Premier League team relegated to the championship, and that's how their fans viewed it. Whereas we look at it as we're kind of a championship team, and getting out of the championship is the goal kind of thing. But we all know how hard League One is to get out of. Falkirk are the perfect example of that. We were the perfect example of that for a few years. It's a really difficult league to get out of, and I wonder if the Championship's actually much just the same. Like it's hard to get out of, but maybe staying in the Premier League isn't quite as hard as getting out of the Championship. I don't know, but I don't know if boring winning is maybe the. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but maybe that's the way that they need to do it. Like,
I feel like we're slightly damning Ian Collins writes for the paper. Don't know how many times I'm going to do that over at least the next few weeks. We're slightly damning Neill Collins already. Just accused of
I don't mean that.
Deciding he's going to be boring.
Yeah, no, not at all. I'm meaning in terms of we at the moment, as Scott was saying, we are a bit boring. Like the last, I don't even know how long we have been a bit boring. Maybe if we can just be boring and win games, that's actually the winning combination that he needs to stumble upon. Maybe he doesn't need to revolutionise it. I don't know.
Well, boring's probably the wrong word to use for this next point because it's subjective. But I think if we're prepared to take the board at face value, and I think the further removed you are from the sort of Rovers bubble, the less likely you are to do that. Ian Murray was sacked probably because he was boring, actually. Like, that last season, and again, I'm saying boring's not the right terminology, really. But I think the root cause of his sacking, effectively, is looking at last season and going, yeah, you won a lot of games, relatively speaking, but you didn't do it very well. So we did a bit of a kind of deep dive at one point into the XG from last season, which I'm not sold on the methodology or any of that kind of stuff at all, but I think some people could be. And when you look at it, like you said already, Dundee United last season, they kind of had two sort of modes. They either struggled and they got beat, or they drew, or they kind of snuck a last-minute winner, or they blew teams away. Like, you could tell, if Dundee United were 2-0 up in the first half hour, that game was going to finish 4 or 5 or 6. If they were 0-0 at half-time, it was going to be narrow as anything. Every single game we played was narrow as anything. And some of the games that we won probably shouldn't have done. And then there weren't really any where it was like, until I think, the very last day we beat Arbroath 5-0. And I think we beat Dunfermline by more than a goal in March.
Yeah.
And I think that was it. And I think that's... Says he, boring's not quite right, but it's probably quite close, where it's like, you never really convincingly beat anybody over the piece. And so I think that is presumably, whether it's been said out loud or not, I think that's what the board are looking for, is you've got to beat some people at least some of the time by design. Like, too much of this felt like it was that kind of chaos stuff that we were all buzzing off for the first half of the season.
Yeah.
But it was a little bit like, you cannot just keep smashing your heads together and hoping you don't get hurt. Like, it's not gonna play out in the long term. It's not sustainable, effectively. And I think that So if you could be boring, but in the sense of you get yourself 2 goals up and then you shut up shop, but you win 2-0, I think that would be boring, but it would be much preferable to you win 4-3 every week, but there's a very heavy suspicion that it might have been 4-3 to the other team had, you 2 things gone slightly differently in the last minute. And it will be... I'm really, really keen to see the extent to which Neill Collins makes changes that are obvious. Because I don't know... I meant to ask this on a pod before we had a new manager, and somehow in 30 days I never actually managed to do it. But what I wanted to ask was, when a new manager comes in and we don't know who it is, like, what do you see them changing? Like, what do you think, if you were suddenly coming into this Rovers side and it's like, right, you've more or less got what you've got, you might get a lone player or two. Like, what do you see changing? Because I struggle to answer that. In the way that when, we get beat by Airdrie, there wasn't a dozen things where I was like, bloody hell, why is Ian Murray doing this and this and this and this? Like, things that you would want to be fixed. So it's really interesting for me to see Neill Collins, who is a professional football manager with a very good pedigree, when we do get 3 or 4 games down the line, is this going to be almost unrecognisable to what's gone before? Or is it going to be very, very similar, but with these little tweaks that you would hope are then making a big difference? Obviously, you could make loads of tweaks and it could be terrible, but hopefully that's not the case. Let's just move forward a little bit, but kind of staying on a similar line. We do have a game on Sunday. So the Challenge Cup game was moved to 1:00 on Sunday because of the Ayr show. I didn't realise that's what that was called until I tried to say it out loud there. That's confusing. So this will obviously be Neill Collins' first game. I assume he will be in the dugout with 4 or 5 days' notice. I hate that, by the way, when managers get a job and they announce it on like the Thursday or the Friday. And they're like, I'm going to watch it from the stand. Shut up.
No.
Get in the dugout. Like, even nothing to lose. If the team gets beat, you still can just claim you've only just turned up. But if they win, you get to claim all the credit. That's just abject cowardice. And I hate seeing it from any new managers. So, having been announced on a Tuesday, Neill Collins better be in the dugout on the Sunday.
He did say in his interview that he would be in the dugout on Sunday.
Good. That's 1 point from me for Neill Collins then.
If he just leaves folk up at corners, it'll be 2 points, I tell you.
He's halfway to a league title. Graeme, Ayer's your speciality. It's your home. So we'll come to you first on this. What, if anything, are you hoping to see specifically on Sunday from the Rovers under Neill Collins?
I'd like to see us take the game, the scruff of the neck, and go at Ayr. I felt when we played them in the league, we set up. We've seen them a couple of games. They were very fast starters against Airdrie and almost blew them away straight away. Yeah, so we'd set up, I would have said, in a way to absorb that, and I think we did quite comfortably until Sean Byrne did what he did. So I'd like to see us have more of a go at them. Well, 11 men, we didn't do that at all. I don't think we were very good with the ball. I think they were very, very quick when they won the ball. I think 2 or 3 occasions they won the ball and there were 4 guys in the box. But we were very, very pedestrian. I would like to see a quicker tempo, on that basis. I think anything other than that, you can say what you can say about the manager. What can he do? What can he not do? It depends on what players he's got. Because I don't think the injury situation's improved vastly. I think we've all talked about changes you would make because it's just a Diddy Cup game. But again, he'll be looking to start it as strong as he can because it's now his team and he's got to do something with it. So I think that's important. And Somerset Bob will love this because that bubble's burst anyway because they didn't beat them firmly. So let's. Can you re-burst the bubble? I don't know.
Careful.
I know it'll be sharp window
Somerset Bob will be coming for you.
We'll be tracking me down.
Just you mentioned there about kind of increasing the tempo. That is one thing in that kind of tactical blog piece. This Barnsley side was really, really dangerous on the counter-attack. And I think this is a little bit, again, to go back to if you see yourselves as the kind of big fish in a league, I think there's a bit of kind of sneering that's done about playing counter-attack football. Like it feels, because by its nature, it's very reactive. But actually, I'd be quite happy with that. If you be solid at the back, but then you can kind of break forward. And I was thinking about
styles. If we talk about styles, I would say that all the time I've watched Raith Rovers, that's the style. Fast counter-attacking football. That's what I've enjoyed about watching Raith Rovers over the years, is how they play like that, and I would say that's our style.
I think we've got the players to do it as well.
Yeah.
I think that there's players in that squad who would quite happily play in that kind of, starting from a slightly deeper position, but then breaking in numbers with, if you can turn the ball over. Guys like, how often have we seen Dylan Easton, for example? He's got the ball at his feet, but the defence is just squared up in front of him. And he has to try and run through a guy to just make the bit of space to get it. If you can drop the entire team 20 yards deeper, but then break on the opposition when you get through, there's guys in that Rovers team who should be able to be more dangerous in that. And I don't know that there's too many guys that you would say actually would be really unsuited to that. So again, no idea at all if that's something that Neill Collins is like philosophically really wedded to, or if that was just a thing that he turned up at Barnsley, looked at his team and decided that was the best way to go. But it's an interesting one to see to what extent we will see that. Scott, I know you took the trouble to kind of prep out an 11 for this game. Do you want to tell us who made your starting 11 for the first game of the Collins era?
Yeah, obviously we were kind of discussing it just before we started recording, saying it felt like it would be a lot more difficult. It already was, considering Ian Murray was always chopping and changing, and then also Potter ended up doing the same. So, I've not even really put a formation on it. I've just put 11 names down that I would like to see playing, and he can figure out himself what formation
John
he wants
approach to football management.
It's just to see if these sort of 11 would play, what can he do with them, sort of thing. But I actually, until last week, would have played Andy McNeil in this game, and it's ridiculous because it is literally one silly moment that happened. I just don't want Kev to go into a derby game no having played since that moment. Now, he'll have had 2 weeks of training in between and all that I'm sure he's already forgot about it. But I think professionals always say that you can't recreate stuff for a game in training. You can try, but there's no 3,000 punters in the stand shouting and bawling about whatever whilst you're training with Robbie Thompson and stuff like that. So I think I would just go back and play Kev, despite, had he not had that ricket at the weekend, I probably would have played Andy McNeil, just to, again, give him game time. I think if he's fit, because he's not been even listed half the time, I'd like to see Kieran Freeman back at right back. Just play somebody in their position, please, at right back, because we're going back to that's something that I want the manager to do, is place people in the positions for a start, because we've seen a lot of it's been forced at times, but we've seen too much chopping and changing and people in different positions. But I think I would go Hanlon and Dicko as the centre half pairing. I would give Ewan Murray just the week off, even if he kind is fit. I think the fact that it's a fairly quick turnaround and it's a Friday night game as well, I would just give him the day off and just say, look, just prepare yourself for the Derby game, basically. And then Lewis Stevenson at left back. Again, I've got Scott Brown down as a question mark. It just seems to be a matter of when is he coming back, because every week we're seeing he's training or he's in pictures and stuff like that, and he keeps saying, "Oh, I'm here," like to the social media camera, but we don't know when he's coming back, and it's all the rumours of, "Oh, he's close," and I mean, what was that? 4 weeks ago, somebody said that he was due back the next week. So, like, yeah, obviously you get set
He
back.
mentioned I was going to say just really quickly, he did talk about on the Raith TV commentary, which I know you were watching as well, but he did, it was the first I'd heard it actually said out loud. He said that he was close and then had another setback.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that the first one hadn't cleared up. There seemed to have been something else had happened. But
no, I mean, I get that. Like, how many times did we hear it with Ross Matthews when he had that toe injury, that something was going on again? So it was, and talking of that, I would have Matthews still in the midfield. I think the fact that he's been playing in there and he's been playing fine, so I would stick him in the middle, and I would have. See, I've actually got the three of them, the three destroyers as I'm calling them, in the middle of the park: Byrne, Brown, and Matthews, because I think there's no many midfield winning that battle against them three in there. But again, it's down to fitness and stuff like that. And then I've got Jameson. I've got the three Lewises in the front three, basically. I've got Jameson, Gibson and Vaughan as a sort of front three. Probably Vaughan is the out-and-out striker with Jameson on one side and Gibson on the other. I just think Jameson and Gibson would probably give Vaughan a lot of options in terms of runs in behind that would cause defences problems, where Vaughan just then needs to make a smart run or a 1-2 or something to kind of get round the defender. So and Vaughan likes to shoot for wherever as well, so he might get a goal out of nothing, and he does like playing against Ayr, and he's admitted that before. So that's the sort of team that I've gone with, but again, I'll probably be proven absolutely wrong that one of these guys might play.
At least we've got an excuse this week. Unprecedented selection. The Rovers did tweet a photo from training earlier on that looked like it was kind of the end of training, and they were standing in a circle with Neill Collins, and I think sort of counting the feet in that picture because there's people behind others. I think 17 players there. One of them was Callum Hanna, who'll obviously be at Montrose, and you got two goalies in there as well. So if you're taking that as an indication, I think you're looking at a fairly thin bench again, and probably not too many sort of returning from injury. Leslie, given it's the Challenge Cup, even if it is the manager's first game, I mean, are you expecting to see many players back? Is this kind of game that really you're prepared to sacrifice in the cause of getting players back fully fit for the league games?
It's a difficult one to know what to expect. From the manager's perspective, it's maybe not a bad thing that he's effectively got a free hit. I don't want to call it a free hit because the Challenge Cup's great, don't get me wrong. When you get to the semi-final and the final, it's brilliant, you want to win it. But it's as close as you're going to get at this stage of the season to having a game where you can bed yourself in, you can get to know the team without the pressure that comes with it. It is difficult though. I mean, I think certainly I wouldn't want to be risking anybody who's touch and go, given that we've got the Derby coming up, which, by the way, if we lose, we will go bottom, but that's not going to happen, so let's not talk about that. But, you've got a Derby coming up, and you've got league games coming up, so certainly I wouldn't see anybody who is touch and go being rested. It might be a good game if there's guys that are fit and have missed a few games to get some minutes and sharpness under their belt. So Sam Stanton, for example, we maybe don't want to risk him given that he is the power slayer, but if he's fit enough and we can get 20-30 minutes out of him at the end of the game, great. Conversely, there might be guys who have played a lot of football and who we have leaned on a lot who might deserve a rest. I'm thinking about Callum Smith and Lewis Gibson here. Depending on who's available, this might be a good game to give one of them a bit of a rest. Although, I think ultimately we are going to be constrained quite a bit by simply who's available, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see one of these extremely light benches.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting point you made on the last podcast. I say an interesting point you made. You were just quoting Laurie Ellis, but we'll credit you with it anyway. I think we'd said that in relation to Ewan Murray, obviously going off injured, and he said he was carrying a bit of a knock. That I think I've got this right. That he'd said that about 60% of the time, you're likely to be kind of dealing with something to some degree. And I think it's an interesting point actually in relation to the overall injury picture. It's like it's basically a sort of vicious cycle that you get into with these. Which is the more injuries that you have, the more injuries that you get. And the sort of conspiratorial mindset, and you see it with all football clubs, not just the Rovers. You start to get these questions about, like, what's the manager doing in the training ground? So we've not got one. So what's your next question? So, well, what's the physio doing? What's the medical staff? Like, our players been worked too hard. And I think sometimes it's more simple than that. It's that when you've only got two fit centre-halves, those two centre-halves are playing every minute of every game. Saw it a couple of seasons ago with Tom Lang, and he came back from his really bad injury, and then we didn't have any choice but to play him every single week. And then eventually I think it was his hamstring. It was something unrelated to the sort of specific injury. And it happened with Dunfermline a couple of times last season. So with Kyle Benedictus, they rushed him back for a derby and he picked up an injury. And I think that is that's the risk situation that we're in at the moment. And I think
just
you're right.
Very briefly before because I appreciate I've just had some airtime, but we're not alone. Pretty much every season for the last few seasons, you've had a team that's got humped with injuries at the start of the season, and they've actually gone on to do pretty well. So Morton last season, we were like, oh, they're away, they've only got 2 subs, they're knackered, they're down. They ended up knocking on the door of playoffs. The season before, it was Partick, it was Inverness, same thing. So it does happen. It's not just us. You get teams that do just get hit with injuries and will then come on strong later in the season.
Yeah, that's. I mean, if you just add Callum Fordyce back into the mix over the last few weeks, then Ewan Murray's almost certainly sat out one of those games, and then he's probably 20% fitter or whatever, or less likely to then pick up that kind of issue. It's the whole thing. It's the benefit of the wingers that we've got at the moment. We're actually then, it's almost ironic that because we've got so many wingers, we're less likely to have injuries to our wingers. So we then have more available wingers, and it's kind of self-fulfilling in that sense. So yeah, if there is anyone who has been kind of carrying knocks, as you say, depending on their position, they might have been sort of forced to play recently anyway. This could very well be the opportunity that one or two players who you might not necessarily expect could kind of drop out. And then you also got like Lewis Gibson, who, as far as I'm aware, is completely fit, 100% fit. He's just had a lot of football recently. Blair, what about you? Any particular thoughts specifically in this game on Sunday?
So I'm probably coming at this a little bit from the other angle, because we're off the back of 2 defeats on the bounce and momentum is massive. So for me, I'd play anyone that's fit if they're available. I think winning the game on Sunday actually could be more important than we kind of give it credit for, because it's that thing of a journey of 1,000 steps. A journey of 1,000 miles, starts with 1 step. You've got to build a bit of momentum at some point. You've got to get a bit of kind of traction going. And I think new manager bounce has a shelf life. And if you lose the first game, it kind of doesn't come in the same way. Do you know what I mean? Hopefully we go down on Sunday, they rest everybody because they're big time, and we roll them over, and then all of a sudden you're going into the derby with a little bit more of a spring in your step, as opposed to going into the derby on the back of your third straight defeat. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Like it's so hard to tell, because the truth is, like we say, we've no idea who's fit and who's not. The one thing I would say though, in terms of needing a rest and stuff, it's early in the season, so I'm hopeful that, likes of Gibson in particular, he's a young lad. I can't see him. I can't see him wanting a rest, because the other side to it is, as much as momentum's important for the squad, if you're in the manager's team on Sunday and you win, you've got a good chance of starting against Dunfermline in the derby, staking a claim for that as well. So there's a lot of players I think will not want to give up their places quite so quickly, and they'll want to show the new manager what they can do, I would hope, as well. So, I think ultimately that's what new manager bounce is a bunch of guys who are all trying to impress the new gaffer. And so you've got to kind of take advantage of that when you can. So it will be interesting based on just who's actually available and who's not.
Yeah, I think you're right on that point there about what actually is a new manager bounce, and I think it is that it's not only players trying to impress the new manager. Sometimes it is just like a change is as good as a rest. Just working in different ways. Don't even need to necessarily be actually better ways of working. It's just that it's different. It's a different voice. We talked a little bit on the immediate reaction to Ian Murray being sacked about, is it an element of they've just been hearing the same things for too long? Like, it's the same voice saying the same things, and actually does the magic start to wear off a little bit? And just by the virtue of it being someone new, someone different who has different ways of doing things, training's going to be different. There'll be different drills and different just ways of approaching things. And even, it's something that it came out a long, long time ago. It actually came out while Ian Murray's stock was probably at its highest. I remember him saying in an interview that he wouldn't pick his team until a Saturday morning. Like, the players wouldn't know who was playing until like a couple hours before the game. Like, they'd turn up for the game and then find out whether they were playing or not. Now, as I say, whether that's the right or wrong way to do it is entirely subjective. But if that's just different, it's just a different thing. It just changes things around, and that's where you get a reaction. And, typically when a manager's been sacked, it's because they've been doing badly. So the reaction has only got one way to go. So, well, definitely, it's almost a little bit of a phony war, this first game, because it's the Challenge Cup. But I don't think there will be any. I don't think that'll be the mindset within the football club. As you say, I think the players will be desperate to impress. Neill, I nearly called him Ian again. Neill Collins will be desperate to get a positive result. And yeah, as you say, we've lost 2 games in the bounce, and we've got a derby next. Really, we could actually all just do with a win, just to put a bit of a slightly more positive kind of spin on things, and a little bit of swagger back. It's kind of going into that derby. Blair, did you want to touch on the Predictor League before we wrap up? Or re-plug it?
Aye, so we've still got kind of about 80 or 90 folk playing regularly, which is great. I would say genuinely, if you've missed the last couple of weeks, get back involved, because it's a relatively low-scoring game, so you can still miss a few weeks and catch up. We've got the top 5 just about to get. I've just hit post as I'm doing this, so that'll timestamp it for everybody who's listening. And it's a rip-roaring return of Duncan's dad.
That's enough time for you, Blair. Sorry, thank you for that. That's the
the true brains behind the Cameron Empire is back in the top 5. But no, yeah, I'm really pleased with how it's going. So hopefully everybody's still enjoying it. The 2 games are going to go up. I'll put them up today as well once I decide what they're going to be. But obviously the Rovers will be one of them on Sunday. But we'll get another game in there as well, and we'll just keep it rolling over.
Perfect, excellent, and we'll I'm firing hundreds of links into the show notes, but I will pop that in there as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in once again. Safe travels down to Ayr on Sunday, where we will hopefully see some form of impact from Neill Collins and his methods, and see what that brings. We will be back with a reaction pod from that game, as you would expect. I'm not entirely sure when that will be. At the moment, the game being kind of early on a Sunday afternoon really clashes with our podcast schedule, to be perfectly honest with you. It's very inconsiderate from the people behind the Ayr show, but we'll get over that, and we'll get together at some point. So keep an eye on your podcast feed and your YouTube page and all that other stuff. Yes. So as I say, thank you very much, and goodbye.